Similar to the event before the launch of Battlefield 2042, EA invited creators and members of the press to a preview event in which we were able to try out Battlefield 2042's first season, 0 Hour. While it has some new content, including one beautiful new map, but just 2 new weapons, is it enough to bring back the player base that has been less than impressed with the game so far? Well, let's dive in and check it out. Thanks for watching 9 to 5 Toys. Be sure to like, subscribe, and enable notifications with the bell icon so you don't miss any upcoming videos. This event opened up with a presentation on what all is in store, and then we were immediately able to get into a match of Breakthrough on the new map. Well, some were able to. Others, like myself, were stuck in matchmaking issues for at least 30 minutes. But of course, everyone in charge of the event relayed how that was just a fluke and servers shouldn't be an issue when the season goes live on the 9th. But I just had flashbacks to launch day when my friends and I weren't able to get into a match straight away. Because of the limited number of people invited, most of our matches were below maximum server capacity, which gave an odd feel to the new map. After about an hour of Breakthrough, the servers were switched and we were able to hop in and try Conquest. And they filled the rest of these servers up with AI, and so that actually made up about 50% of the 64-player game. So the highlight of this season, at least for me, is going to be the new map, which is Exposure. Set in Canada, this cliffside combat area has huge elevation changes with a combination of above ground kind of military sites and a pretty slick close quarters interior portion. It felt considerably smaller than the other Battlefield 2042 launch maps, but they said it should still be able to handle up to 128-player Conquest matches. Breakthrough has been limited to 64, but that change took place in an update before this event. DICE has received quite a bit of criticism over the level design of many of the launch maps, with wide open spaces that lack any sort of cover for moving about. And many of the maps are also very clean looking, which doesn't really play in with the war-torn narrative of the Battlefield franchise. Development for Exposure was underway when the game launched, and during the Q&A, the developers mentioned that feedback was heard and taken into consideration with the design of this new map. And for the most part, I think they've made it a pretty interesting map with a variety of areas and cover. There are still some open areas, like there's this massive cliff right in the middle, which is above the B section, but I rarely found myself up there anyway, so I didn't really have a huge issue with that. I often found myself in the interior areas for more close quarters combat. There are zip lines that get up and down the cliffs relatively quickly, and they even mentioned that there's a vehicle lift, but I didn't see this in my gameplay, or at least I didn't realize what it was. Overall, I think the map looks really good and also plays really well. We didn't really get a feel for how it will play with full servers, but I think that the interior portion around B1 and B2 will be a lot of fun. It can get pretty hectic in there, with plenty of potential for flanking thanks to large windows looking out over the valley. One other interesting feature here is we didn't see any sort of levolution or, changes that happen to the map like we've seen on some of the other launch maps. There weren't any tornadoes, there weren't any sandstorms that came in, there weren't any rocket launches, which are all features we've seen on other Battlefield 2042 maps. There was nothing like that here. One of the other major portions here of this update are the 2 new weapons, which include the BSVM, which is basically a modern AS-Val, and another throwback, the crossbow. Found in the DMR slot, the BSVM can also play like an assault rifle thanks to extended mags and a full auto mode. Rather than using it for mid-range encounters and plinking, I often put a close-range sight, bigger magazine, and a grip on the BSVM and used it for clearing objectives close up. I still don't know if it would replace the K30 or the AK, which are my usual go-to weapons, but I did have a lot of fun using it. And then fun and frustrating at the same time, the crossbow opens up for some epic plays with one-shot frags when up close, or exploding bolts with a short time-delayed payload. It took me a while to get used to it, and I definitely missed a lot with it, but it was very satisfying when I did land a hit. The one-hit nature of it falls off after a distance, but it's still fun to play with. Recently, DICE has made some adjustments to some of the specialists, but the only new addition for 0 Hour is Yulina Liz. I think that's how you say it. Her main gadget is a TV screen-controlled rocket launcher, so after aiming down sights and pulling the trigger, the missile can be controlled and also sped up with an afterburner-like mode while staying a first-person view from the rocket. The main goal here is, of course, taking out armored targets like tanks and helicopters, and that's also evident by the lack of damage that it seems to inflict on foot soldiers. It can also be a bit tricky to fly, and combine that with the speed and maneuverability of the new helicopters, I missed quite a few of my rockets to top-tier heli pilots. And in addition to the rocket launcher, this gets a red outline of damaged vehicles on the map, so this makes it easier to target opponents with the rocket launcher, as well as call out locations to allies. And I didn't really spend much time in either of the two new helicopters, but I spent plenty of time being killed by them. The new Hannibal has some really interesting weapons with devastating HE bombs. It's also extremely agile, making it hard to hit with Liz's player-controlled rockets. They are marked as stealth helicopters, and there were a few instances where I was not able to lock onto them with the anti-air launcher because they were in a stealth mode. The gunner seat in the Hannibal helicopter seemed kind of hard to use. It was just a machine gun that didn't really have a whole lot of effectiveness. It's just a two-person helicopter, but the pilot seat is definitely where a lot of action and a lot of damage can happen. And like other titles, DICE is also bringing a battle pass to Battlefield 2042 with Season 1. There's a lot of free content as you work through the 100 levels, but to get everything, you'll need the premium battle pass. And one of my favorite items in here was a skin for Angel, which is going to be a premium item. And unfortunately, this kind of seems like where a majority of the new content resides, which, is a little bit of a bummer. There are a lot of things I'd rather have than, additional cosmetics. And the premium version of the battle pass will cost 1,000 BFC, which is about $10. In a Q&A session after the playtest, members of the team mentioned that there are a few more updates that will be coming out, but not necessarily with 0 Hour. One that should happen between Season 1 and Season 2 is the addition of a lifetime stats page. They said they've been tracking everything since launch and will implement this at some point. Two other updates that have been announced and talked about but don't have a release date yet are the inclusion of more portal weapons in the standard 2042 all-out warfare modes, as well as new voice lines for the specialists. Moving forward with this update in season, DICE has removed the end-of-match voice lines that have received a lot of criticism, stating that there will be reworked lines at some point that match the more gritty nature of Battlefield 2042. As someone commented in the press event, will we ever find out just how many times Angel has done it again? As advertised before this event, DICE is also developing reworked versions of two of its original maps, Kaleidoscope and Renewal. The first is slated for release in August, while the rework of Renewal isn't going to be until Season 2. And while I'm glad they're working on these, as I think they need a lot of work and this can make it a lot more fun, I am definitely disappointed that we have to wait even longer for those. Playing anything but the new map when Season 1 goes live is going to feel pretty stale. Besides these new features and updates, Battlefield 2042 has had a pretty tumultuous life with performance issues, messy menu UI, and even lacking some basic functions like a scoreboard at launch. For the most part, it does seem like DICE is listening and making changes that enhance the experience in-game. There are still some weird issues like not being able to see the scoreboard at the beginning of a match, when you're waiting for at least 30 seconds for the match to start with nothing else to do once you choose your loadout. There's also that beginning animation that shows off the map but is just frustrating after you've played that map more than even once. It just becomes pointless. Server performance overall seemed good to me. It was certainly leaps beyond the state of the initial launch, which was plagued with issues. There was one instance where my T menu wasn't working to swap attachments, but switching weapons fixed that, and then there was maybe one moment where I noticed what seemed like a stutter, but otherwise things felt pretty smooth and solid. So the big question here is, did DICE do enough to bring players back? I mean, time will tell, but I have the feeling that this really isn't enough to make most jaded players spend any more time beyond just checking out the new map. Personally, I still play Battlefield 2042 almost weekly with a few friends, and I'm stoked to have some new content. I really would have loved to see the reworked maps as a part of this season launch, but all of the new updates and content are a welcomed addition in my mind. So what do you think? Will you hop back into Battlefield 2042 with this new season to check it out? Let us know down in the comments below. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. This is Jordan with 9to5 Toys.